All right, welcome to the Golden Light Awakening podcast. I am here with a new guest, Aaron here, and today I think is going to be an absolutely wonderful conversation about life, about non-duality, about oneness, about who we are, nature of reality, and everything in between. So, much love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And well, let me just first hear a bit about yourself, like who you are, or at least in this moment.
I love it. Well, thanks so much. It's great to be here and talk about all of these things. Yeah, I'm uh I'm someone who grew up in a really I grew up on a commune in a really sort of wild and free way. I didn't go to normal school at all until I was in like fourth grade in America. Um, so I grew up in sort of a really magical realm of just knowing that I was deeply connected to all things. And of course, as with so many of us, not all of us, but so many of us, what happened is with school and life, I sort of got pulled away from that in my elementary years. And it wasn't really until college that my soul was pulling me back and saying, okay, it's time for you to deeply reconnect and commit to this journey of
Hmm.
spirit and prioritize that. At the time, I thought I was going to be a scientist, and I was at first. I studied biology and ecology, but even in biology, even though I was very much thinking I was going to be, a famous, renowned scientist, I chose to have my field be tropical biology. And so at first I
Hmm.
went to Costa Rica and lived in the mountains in Monteverde. And then I ended up traveling and living all over the world, in the forests, in the remote places, studying the birds and monkeys in the tropics
Okay.
all around the world. And again, even though during that period of my life, I still had the focus of, oh, I'm doing this for science. What happened was I ended up sitting beneath trees for days, for hours, for months, for years at a time, quietly with deep attention, watching the birds, watching the monkeys. So when you're doing that, you don't want to move. You want to be in total stillness because you don't want to scare them away. You want to have focused attention. I can see from your smile, you know where I'm going with this. Like,
Yeah.
about a decade later, I was like, oh, I had years and years of, literally thousands of hours of all day long deep meditation practice before I even knew that I was doing meditation practice.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and and so yeah, even when I thought I was a scientist, right, my spirit took me to this place where I was in the forest meditating with the birds and the animals and skipping ahead now, many years and many things in between. At the time, I was an ornithologist and ecologist, and I thought I knew everything about the birds I was studying. And certainly now I know that now when I let go of my knowledge and open up my heart and just connect to the birds directly, connect to the animals and trees directly and all things, I talk to them in a way, talk to them in air quotes. I talk to them through my heart and communicate in ways where I know much more and am much more in tune with the trees and the birds and all the animals, way more than I ever was when I knew everything about them.
Wow, this is really
Yeah,
interesting. I
yeah,
was seeing some relations in the like the idea of kind of being in a field, but then without really knowing, kind of being guided towards something else with and just it happening naturally. I think that
yes.
this is something that's very interesting. And to me, that has happened many times in my life where I was doing something and it's like I thought I knew the reason why I was doing it, but then there was something else that was kind of this guiding hand that was propelling me in a direction that would eventually lead to just embodying like my true self ultimately, and really um being into that heart space and feeling that unity with everything. And it's kind of this natural unfoldment that happened to take me there. I didn't know initially when I started seeking that that's what I was seeking.
Right.
And
That's right.
so I thought it was all these other things, but then it turns out that no, it's just who I really am, and who I really am, well, is much more than who I thought I was at that point.
And because our brains, right, when you say who I am is much more than than who I thought I was. And that's the key phrase, who I thought I was, because, our brains are not capable, nor were they ever designed to fully comprehend or hold the fullness of our being, right? In Taoism, which is one of my main influences, they talk about the heart wisdom, right? The translation for one of the core tenets of Taoism is the heart wisdom. And I really love that because it really allows my Western mind to know that, the heart is not just this sort of Western idea of love and whatever, which is
Mhm.
also the fabric of the universe, by the way, but also the wisdom of the universe. And it's through our heart center that our energy and connection happens. And our brains are really just, our knowing and thinking is there and evolved for us just to keep us safe and to keep us, oriented in daily life. But just like we don't put our kidneys in charge, they have a very important role. Without our kidneys, we would die, but we don't put them in charge of our life purpose. And I think of the brain in the same way. I think of the
Mm.
brain in the same way. Like it has a very important role, but it's not in charge of my life purpose. My heart wisdom is in charge of my life purpose, the universe and being in the flow. And as you were just discussing, as we shared, you know, the teachings and the teachers in all forms arrive for us in every moment because we are co-creating this universe. And there's a thousand ways that sometimes it was, 20 years later, I look back and realized who these people really were for me. Years ago,
Wow.
I was in the Rockies of Colorado, working as a naturalist still shortly after university, and I met a man who made drums and rattles, rawhide drums and rattles, and I really wanted to learn how to make that. So I became friends with him, and he agreed to take me for the weekend to his cabin up in the mountains and teach me these methods. So I was super excited, and I was, young and anxious and really wanted to know everything still. And so we went there and stayed overnight. And I woke up and we were sipping tea and looking at the aspens around his cabin. And I was like, okay, let's go. I want to, let's go to your workshop and I want to learn everything. And he just sipped his tea and quietly smiled and said, just drink your tea, you know, just be. And that was sort of the way the whole weekend was. And I did learn how to make the drums and rattles and I did learn his craft, but it wasn't until, again, decades later that I realized when I went through a deeper awakening of my own, I was like, oh, he was my first direct teacher of non-duality, of showing me the presence and unity of all things and allowing me just to be and giving me that transmission of the oneness through his eyes, through his
Mhm.
being, through his presence. That whole weekend was a teaching, certainly of those techniques, but more importantly, of the way he was. And so his creations, his art were just an expression, an expansion, a manifestation of his being, which was why they were so special and why I was attracted to learn from him.
That's
But it was
wonderful.
it was it was decades later when I realized, and I broke down crying with gratitude, and I looked him up, and he had passed away. He was an older man, and I just saw his picture in his obituary online, and we can receive transmission of energy through people's eyes and through pictures.
For sure.
Of course, there's no time as well. That's a whole other thing. There's no time. So I just stared into for weeks. I just stared at this picture and gave him the transmission of gratitude and received this feeling and this energy of acknowledgement of the role he had played in showing me and giving me that groundwork in non-duality and in the unity of all things. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really key what you're sharing here. And these are the kinds of things that and this is why I love these kinds of conversation because just right now, as you were sharing, it's like this is a concept that I'm familiar with, I know it, but then I just realized that there's like an even deeper layer that I could take this to in my practices and my retreats and things like that, and just kind of seeing things from the past as if they're happening right now, and then it was like, okay, well, if it's happening right now, what do you want to do with it? Do you want
Yes.
to like continue to hold on to the resentment and the pain and all of that that you felt in that moment, or do you want to start having like love and compassion for the learning that you had in that moment and the soul that have these things kind of happen between you and that. So yeah, it's really interesting, and I also wanted to ask you because clearly you seem to share that at that moment you had newfound kind of almost felt like an experiential knowledge of non-duality. So let me ask you, first of all, if you had have like a conscious experience of non-duality, and if so, how did that happen?
Mhm. So yes. And also, of course, right, whenever we talk about non-duality like this, I want to just like fully caveat that any or all of the words I'm going to say are going to be
Of course.
a vague approximation of sort of pointing towards a poetry that points towards something that we can't quite grasp, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
so
mean, I know what you mean,
deeper,
but
of course, I just want to make sure that, even your listeners and we're all on the same page of like, the deeper answer is, well, of course I haven't had any experiences of that because an experience is a cognition and all of those things. So just those caveats of like, yes, I'm here to talk about it and bring this forward with people and help people to understand and stabilize when they have these own experiences for themselves. And also, it's not something we can talk about, but let's try. Um,
Hmm.
After that experience as a biologist, I realized I didn't want to continue on the academic path, and I met this man who was a tantric guru, and I initiated on this path of Kashmiri Shaivism. And I lived
Okay.
with him and studied with him for quite a number of years. And that's also a very deep non-dual tradition, one of the very ancient Vedic traditions. Um, and so in there, we did a lot of really deep and powerful practices. And I certainly had many, many experiences where for moments or for certain parts of practices, I would, maybe break through into some realms of deeper consciousness. But but still I was in the realm of consciousness of trying to
Right.
be and trying to do. So I had some experiences of breakthrough, but they never I was desperately clawing for something, but it never landed. Um, After that and overlapping that, I worked with a Taoist teacher for many years. He passed away in 2015. And both of those traditions gave me a deep groundwork in acceptance that there are these multiple realms of non-duality, and that it is, not only possible but probable, and in some ways inevitable and even easy. There's this mythology that moving into, I don't really appreciate this word, but quote enlightenment or these higher states of consciousness or non-duality is some rarefied thing that only the far off sages can do or be. And, that's just simply not my experience and not, I believe, the truth of this universe. And certainly the universe itself in this realm is moving into an age of higher consciousness, right? We're moving into this new age of higher consciousness across all traditions.
Yep.
We're in this shift. So we're in this realm of deepening our consciousness. So it took years of practice and meditation and trying, and then also periods of giving up and sort of feeling despondent and real it wasn't working for me, and years of being in the wilderness of the darkness of disbelief.
Hmm.
And it was in one of those periods when I this was in 2018 when I realized in the fall that I was in a period of darkness where things weren't going well for me and a relationship had broken up and some things. And I just was in a period of even depression. And I realized in the middle of the night, I was like, oh, I had this awareness. Oh, if you continue like this in the darkness, if you continue living being cut off, if you continue to be small and compulsive and numbing yourself out and doing all these things, energetically, you're already dead. To myself, energetically, I'm already kind of dead. I'm not fully alive. What are you doing here? And I had this vision where I was shown my whole life if I continued as this way and just how empty and small it was. And in that moment, I had enough awareness and some from some realms just to surrender, just to
Yep.
surrender and say, okay, I'm no longer going to continue like this. I give up. I'm going to completely surrender to the
Mm.
universe, completely surrender to the light of the universe. And I did some men's workshops where we did some somatic healing and did some somatic healing from my heart space and some of my shadow work. And over the next 6 months, I just opened up my heart in deep surrender and trust. I was like, with all of these things I was doing, I have no more attachment to the way things were. I'm just going to let it all go and just trust, trust, trust. And the deeper I just leaned into the trust of letting go, the more love came flooding in.
Mm.
And after a number of months of that, You know, when I slipped into this realm of non-duality, this is looking back on it. It was so subtle that I didn't even know at the time. And at the time, there's maybe 6 months when I was in this really vast void, this really deep emptiness. But it wasn't at all like depression, like I had been before in my life, which is sort of heavy and dark and sticky feeling and sort of dense. It was this like open, vast emptiness, but also sort of a little bit of disconnection. And from the Taoist view, looking back, that's the void of the yin and yang. There's this yin phase of like this emptiness and passiveness and openness that is disorienting until it gets integrated back again with the unity, and then we start to see the context of the walls all around us and realize what we were. And it wasn't until that point, maybe 6 months into this openness, where I woke up one day and was out early and I looked at the sunrise and I just had this rapturous, like I'd never seen the sun before. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, and from there on, I started to be that like time also became fluid for me, like silly putty. I was like, oh, time. I have a watch and a clock, and I can follow time if I need to. It's this sort of artificial construct of modern time. But in reality, time is this fluid construct of that we can flow through and manipulate and use for our own advantage. It's for us to use. It's one of the tools we have. Um, Many more things started to unfold. So it's so simple, it wasn't a sharp break for me. It was this gradual progression of like surrender into the vastness. Um, but when I woke up into it and realized, so I think I was in this period of integration for maybe 6 months, and then I sort of integrated it enough that I was able to hold it, and nothing has ever been the same. One of my teachers used to talk about, on the path, if we feel and integrate this toxic seriousness, that's one of the ways to know that we're not in the flow. That was the word he would use, the toxic seriousness,
Toxic seriousness.
right? Like everything is so important in all of this, right? Just like that's been largely slipped away.
I
Um,
totally
and
agree.
then everything becomes funny. As you're laughing right now, right?
Yeah.
Everything becomes funny. Like things that are difficult and hard, tragedies in myself, with all compassion to suffering, right? With all compassion to the human suffering and the condition that I've had in myself and many others in the universe, from this other perspective, like holding the compassion, but still from this other perspective, just allowing that everything just is. And then like, wow, we get so attached to it. Isn't it so wild? Isn't it so funny and ridiculous? And holding
Hmm.
both of those at the same time is sort of is the way things are for me at this point. Yeah.
That's really wonderful. I mean, I totally I know what you mean. It's almost it feels like a dichotomy or a paradox even, but it really is like that. It's like the simultaneous holding of both of these perspectives and even of like other perspectives at the same time, because when you get into that, it's like you realize that all of these perspectives, they are valid ultimately. There's an infinite amount of them. And so yeah, this is really interesting, that period of like when you were sharing, I had it's what I perceive to be similar to your sunrise experience at some point. It was for me with the ocean, and just like you, it kind of started with surrendering and feeling in my heart, and I was just loving, and I remember I was in the night at the beach, and there was no one around, and I just started singing and dancing, and it was such a beautiful moment. Like all the moments, but like that one for me at that moment was especially beautiful. And the ocean was so wild. And I remember at some point I was feeling all this love in my heart, but then there's like an opening that happened that felt like way more, just momentarily, just way more. And I looked at the ocean and the moon and the stars, and it felt like I was looking at myself through the eyes of the ocean and the moon and the stars, and I was that too. And as I realized that, the sensation in the heart just wildly opened up once again. And then I was feeling myself as essentially everything. And funnily enough, I mean that's another like tidbit of the story, but I closed my eyes, and when I closed my eyes, I saw the face of Jesus.
Mm,
And then I was like, the thought that I had was like, oh wow, he could live in that state all the time. That's what I felt. I mean, I don't know if like how true this is, if it was just a random thought or not, but it's definitely what I felt. And then I just started walking, and I remember I was looking at everybody in their eyes, and I mean, I had like tears flowing down my mind, and it was just I was seeing everything for what it was, and it was just the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It just
beautiful.
is just life happening, and it in all of its glorious beauty.
So glorious. And, you know, I was for many years, even before I've had this deeper awakening, I've been connecting and communicating with spirits of various kinds, ancestors and other spirit guides and angels, and Jesus is one of those beings that comes to me.
Nice.
Um, but one of the deep lessons that my guides want me to share is that, you know, the purpose of coming to Earth, right? The meaning of life from this soul perspective. One of the ways to talk about it. There's many ways we can talk about this Earth experience, but from this perspective, they shared this really, really important lesson that one of the reasons we choose Earth, and there's a waiting list of souls wanting to be here. There's a
That's
waiting list of
nice.
souls that want to be here. There's an excitement to come here. And it's almost, Earth, as I've shown this, is almost like an amusement park in this way, that it's one of the only places, and certainly the only in this exact way, where we're so deeply cut off from our experience of source. So almost nowhere else that I've been shown. And you know, I've been shown a lot of realms, and I'm just open to other people saying, "Oh, I've been shown some other places like this." Okay, great. But
Yep.
in nowhere else that I've seen, and my guides are sharing with me that we're so completely cut off from source when we're born into Earth.
Hmm.
And the amusement park ride of the Earth journey is the journey of reconnection, is the
Mhm.
journey of reconnection. And that can happen when we're here alive on Earth, which is this glorious rapture we're talking about right now. And it can also happen during death and during that transition back to soul, which from from the higher perspective, again, not with all compassion to suffering on Earth, is actually not a tragic occurrence.
Of
You know,
course.
our time on Earth and then passing back out is not a tragic experience. And so the experience of a soul feeling so disconnected, and then from that disconnection being allowed to feel the joy of the expansiveness of our soul and the universe and our
Yeah.
connection and everything. If we're already connected on most other realms, we're deeply more connected. We don't get to experience that like range and that expansion that Earth
Mm.
gives us, right? There's this expansive joy of, I was so connected that I was so disconnected, and now I'm connected again. And that
Yeah.
feeling is something that the soul doesn't get anywhere else, is what I'm shown. So this
This,
is our journey of, you know, and so even all of our, like for myself and so many of us, you know, some of my friends and colleagues and people I know and work with were born and are awake and never really cut off and are just having a beautiful life without a lot of trauma. And that's an amazing path for those people that's true for. But for so many of us, you know, we were pushed to do the work through the abuse we received as children and young adults from our family and friends and our circumstances that, you know, this life created for us so that we have some impetus, so we have enough grist to say like, I choose something different. You know, in Buddhism they say like, okay, you'll suffer until like more suffering is necessary until you're ready to commit to the work. You know, and so for so many of us we need that suffering to to give us the push to say, okay, I'm good. Like in my case, okay, I surrender. You know, enough things have gone badly. Okay, I surrender. I give up fully
yep.
for real. Not just, not
My
just,
way does
not,
not
not
work.
just make believe. Yeah, exactly. I can no longer stand to live the way I was living for a moment longer. I'm done. I'm done with that. And until we're there, for so many of us, we're stuck. For me, I have a pretty good mind, and I was stuck in my mind and all the loops and cycles and all the things that so many of us experience. So that's the joy of Earth, just to share that is just that, this
I
rapture of
mean,
expansion into God. And that so there's no tragedy then for the suffering from this level. Like in the moment when we're suffering, it sucks. It's hard. But the joy of it is that it creates this push and this like almost a cheat code, a wormhole straight to consciousness, straight to God,
mhm.
straight to love, straight to the universe.
Oh
And
man, this
yeah.
is this is so. I mean, it's like I can feel deep down how true this is because I've experienced exactly that. In the moments, I like the few times that let's say those rapture things happen, like the at the highest potency of it, let's just say,
Yeah.
it always felt the same way, and it felt like a remembrance, right?
Yes.
It felt
Yes.
like a remembrance. And so this is, I'm getting chills everywhere as I'm saying this. It's really wonderful, but it's really, that's it. Like this is the really the key of it is the remembrance that ultimately that disconnection is an illusion that was created through that game that we're playing right now. But in fact, we cannot be disconnected ever because we are that source. It's so it's not possible to be disconnected from it. It's who we are and it's infinite. So
And so
it's
so
really,
many, and so many lineages have this perspective of, one of the teachings is there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, you're already here.
yeah.
And that's true, and that's beautiful, and that's perfect. And then also the question is for someone who's stuck not being there, is that useful? Is that a useful thing to say, or does that just infuriate them in some way and keep them more stuck?
It's why we have tools such as sound healing, plant medicine. I do these
Yes,
retreats, breath
exactly. And I
work,
have,
like you know.
the gongs behind me and I have one in front of me, all the vibration. Yeah, and like, all the plant medicine you mentioned is beautiful. All these modalities. One of the things I love to say is that, the plant medicines in so many ways, they just remove all the gates of our consciousness. They just open all the
Mhm,
gates. So we can just move freely through all the realms. And then the question is, wherever we are, whatever work we've done on ourselves, we see the world through that vision, through that perception of where we are in our own healing. And
mhm.
so, for some journeys, if we've done the work, we can move into these realms of non-duality through the plant medicines
Yep.
or through sound healing or through other things, and it can be beautiful and it can help us to continue on the path. But for some people, maybe who are earlier on the journey and they haven't quite done all the work that they need for their journey, and they have a deep dose of plant medicine and go really far, sometimes that could even be maybe a disservice because it can be disassociative and be scary and maybe push them backwards a little bit on their journey because they've gone too far and seen too much vastness when they're still stuck maybe in their smaller perception. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a very, very good point and kind of relates to this idea because personally, the main plant medicine that I work with is called Iboga. I don't know if you
Okay.
have heard about it.
Yes.
But one concept that I've come to realize is that there's this intelligence that this plant has that kind of meets people exactly where they're at. And so it's that's why I mean, I've had, all through my years of facilitation, I've seen various types of experiences that if we were to put on a scale, like the difference between like the lowest and the highest is just night and day. So, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, why is that? And it's exactly as you mentioned. And even for myself, like for the longest time, I went to study with this medicine in Africa in Gabon, and it was like I couldn't understand because the behaviors and the kind of things I was perceiving over there was kind of not at all what resonates with me. Like there's a bunch of like lying and stealing and violence and all of that and voodoo stuff and black magic. And I was like, what is going on there? And these people were working with the same medicine that for me had essentially like opened up my heart to feeling the truth about love and it's just it was really I couldn't compute the reason for that. But at some point, I realized that it's that concept of the medicine meets people where they're at, and it's just that everybody's kind of at their own unique spectrum of the perspective, and it's all perfect and it's all great, and it's not like a judgment of value, more like
Yeah.
a discernment of what is going on. So it's yeah, I think it's really wonderful for that.
I love that. And, one of the lessons that, many traditions hold, and that certainly has been my experience, is that the universe itself is inherently and deeply neutral. You know,
Yeah.
in English, for certain, we have, with every gradient of experience in English, we have a judgment, we have a value, up and light and dark and good and bad and left and right and all of any gradient in English, we put a value on it. There's a better way to be. More is better than less, in all these other ways. But the universe itself is just deeply and inherently neutral and holds all things. In Taoism, they say that the 10,000 things, the 10,000 is the way to say like all the things. And in the Vedic traditions, with all the statues, they show all the gods and goddesses in some of their forms that have all the hands, this ring of hands of all
Mm.
the forms of activity and all the forms of action and all the forms of manifestation. But it's not only light, right? And luckily, I think mostly we're past, certainly, in my experience here in North American New Age, we're past the realm of love and light, and we've accepted that shadow is
Hmm.
important. For most people, we have this deeper understanding in the culture that, okay, we can't just go to love and light. We have to also hold shadow. But there's nothing bad about, the dark magic and voodoo and whatever. But it will take you into a realm that is, if it's darker magic or whatever it might be, it will take you into a darker realm. And is that what you want for your soul? It's a possible path. It's
Yeah,
all here for
exactly.
um, and as we deepen our experience with the light, holding the shadow with love, both expand in a way.
Hmm.
Both Everything expands as we deepen into it. Everything expands. It's not just in one direction. It's in all directions. In all directions. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. That is really wonderful. And so let me ask you then, like with everything that has happened for you in your life so far and all these things and these realizations, these perspectives, what are you currently focused on? What's kind of like what's how's life for you at this point and what's next?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, life is amazing. Life is amazing unfolding gift. Just previously I was a scientist, and then I actually got an MBA, and I was doing corporate. I mean, I was a corporate executive working for companies and doing operations and supply chain and different things. And I've moved on from that, and now I focus full time on just supporting and helping people with their unfolding. So it's just a matter of like, for me, it's the natural progression of like, okay, when my energy is on this level where I am, wherever that, whatever that is, what my soul says and what my heart wants to do is to have these conversations, to connect with people, to hold space for healing, and to share my journey, not from, sharing the journey too. It's not anything like, I think in the past books, like, look at this amazing person who had this amazing journey, and it's so distant and impossible and amazing and fabulous. It's like, no, the opposite. Like, no, all of our journeys are just right here, normal, ordinary, and everything is possible for all of us. The
Hmm.
fact that you and I are here talking about non-duality is a prompt that literally this is possible and available for every single person should they choose it with their soul's path. If this is what you want, this is entirely available for everybody. There's
I agree.
nothing there's a path to it, and there's some steps, but there's so many tools available now, and so being a voice to share that with people and to support them along the way. And then even with plant medicines and just with this mass awakening, there's so many more people now that are transitioning and experiencing these states of non-duality, which without context and support can be disorienting and can be, for some people can be scary, and for some people, because it's so open, what happens, I see a lot with people I work with, is that they don't trust it, and they try to grab onto something that's more certain again. And in some
Hmm.
ways, like, crawl backwards or try to crawl backwards to something with more security. Again, for people who have a grounding in the journey. Like for some people, it can just be an instantaneous crossover and they're stabilized and all everything's great. Amazing. That's congratulations to them. And like in my case, it was like a long, slow crawl of like many journeys past the veil, if you will, into the oneness, and then you know falling or being ejected or crawling back, or and then again and again and again until I sort of stumbled into it and woke up and realized where I was. So just being a voice of stabilized consciousness and awareness to hold people in a more expanded state and to give them the perspective of, yes, this is where you are too. People need affirmation a lot of the times, like, oh yeah, this is not craziness. This is expansion. This is true.
Hmm.
Trust this in a deeper way. Um, so that's a lot of the work I do. And then finding ways to also support people on the ground level. So in January, I'm starting a course for a handful of months working with the Taoist book, The Secret of the Golden Flower, where
Okay.
we're going, step by step. That was sort of a book from 200 years ago in China. So that's very modern Taoism, very modern. And it was a synthesis of saying, oh, there's, in the Taoist traditional canon, there's like 5,000 scrolls that are the core group of Taoist texts. And so, they're saying that's way too much. Let's just synthesize exactly what you might need for this journey from this pathway. Okay. And that was 200 years ago. Um, and the book is very direct about what this path looks like and its meditation and breath work and awareness, but also very mysterious. Also, again, it points to something that can't be talked about.
Of
So we'll take
course.
a several month exploration into that journey. And for people who have an hour or two a day for meditation and contemplation, the book says really clearly, and that's my experience. Like this path is absolutely perfect and pure and correct, and will take you on a deep journey to consciousness. And so for people who have a deep desire to go deep, that's available. And then for people who just want to ground even, 5 minutes a day, that's also beautiful, right? Every day commitment for a few months, 5 minutes a day of meditation and awareness, and then some check-ins. That's also amazingly different from not doing that at all, right? So I support people on that level of like, okay, let's get a good foundation from the basics for people who are ready to like dive in and do that. And then for people who want to work one-on-one and go deeper with the transmission into non-duality. Going back to what you said earlier too about time, I love this. One of the ways that I work with time is that, when we fall into non-duality in the present working with somebody, and then we open our consciousness to the earlier part of their life, but also their ancestors.
Hmm.
We open that cone of consciousness and non-duality into the moment, then even the ancestral experiences become present in this moment. And we can actually work with them and heal them and provide love and alignment to those energetic lines now in the moment and actually change, air quotes, the past that we've brought into the present moment.
I mean,
And
we're getting into it now. Like this is my
yeah, so I
whole
really love this. Yeah, please, please.
my whole concept of like I mean it's a concept I created just the words of it, but I mean I'm sure that some other people that have thought about this or realized this, but I call it the golden timeline, and it's almost like it's a timeline where the past, present, and future kind of converge into that singular moment where it's just the totality of who you are, and like the culmination of everything into that 0 point moment. And I feel like this is the journey that I'm on right now. It's kind of like healing the past and the future simultaneously. Because I mean, as much as you can do what you just mentioned for the past, you can also do it with the future. And we're talking about spirit guides and higher self and things like that. And to me, sometimes I kind of perceive that as being these future versions of myself that, in a way, are still kind of present in this moment. So I mean, there's different filters for them. I've
100%. No,
certainly.
and I'll say, like I shared that experience earlier in my life when I woke up in 2018, where I saw this vision of myself, and I said I saw and I was shown this vision of myself, and it was like, oh, if you continue on like this, energetically, you're already kind of dead. You're already cut off. You're already not fully alive.
Mhm.
since then, what I didn't say was that I've been shown since that that was a future version of myself that went back to myself
Wow.
to
Yeah, what
heal and
that
course correct, right? That was
oh I see,
myself
I
in the
see.
future that went back, which is right here in this cone of now, like as you're saying, in this present time moment,
Yeah.
and saw myself in that moment and said, "No, Aaron, let me show you this path and let me point in a different direction for you." And there's been other times in my life as well when I've been shown where I went back and gave myself advice. I didn't know at the time, I just had a realization or an awareness or something came to me and I believed it. But more recently I've been shown how I've gone back to myself to provide healing, guidance, support to bring me on this journey where I am now.
It's, I mean, this is this is so amazing because I've done that multiple times. Sometimes I've kind of done
Beautiful.
it consciously. I've had dreams of it happening. I mean, I've had dreams of portals opening up and then literally myself coming out of the portal, talking to me, us making a plan, him quote
Yes.
unquote going back into the portal, and then we both do our part on our side, like, and then meeting back again.
Yes.
I mean,
Love
there's
that.
just interesting things like that. And I've also done it for myself in meditation at times where it's like I remember some of the times that I was asking for myself to come and help. Like I was asking for energy or something from my future self that's like at a much better state. And then I was feeling myself receiving it. And so and then sometimes I remember about that and I'm like, oh wow, well let's go in meditation and do it.
Bingo. Yeah, we have to go and do it. And even, I do Akashic readings with people.
Okay.
So I do mediumship and I connect with spirit guides for people and support their soul purpose. And I also go into the Akashic records. And I'm not one that necessarily, some people specialize in like, let me tell you all your past lives and like show you the journey of how you were Cleopatra and all these things. And I don't, that's not what comes through for me, because for me it's really aligned with like, okay, what is going to be supportive of your journey right now? What is going to be supportive and activating for you and your soul purpose and your unfolding? But again, even in that language of like, let me tell you about your past lives, it's like, well, we can say that because it's convenient, but the truth is that all time is now, and so there is nothing. There are no past lives. There's only lives. There are no past lives. There's only this moment, and so we have these simultaneous expressions of our soul in all this cascade of different experiences that are all occurring right now. And so, of course, they're impacting us, right? In some past life, if we had some persecution for our spiritual connection and our magic and our expression in the world as a connected spiritual being, if we were oppressed for that, of course, we're going to feel that impulse now, because it's happening also right now, for example. And we can heal that. We can provide healing and love for that other experience of now, and that will set us free in this realm that's simultaneously occurring and unfolding.
I mean, this is wonderful. I didn't hear everything you just said because I have like a interesting technical issue right now.
Okay.
Just give me one moment.
For sure. For sure.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Wow, that was very crazy. It started to buzz like zzz, I could barely hear your voice.
There was too much energy. I mean, I was talking about the time portals and opening it up that all timelines are right now. I'm not sure what you heard, but I was talking about
Okay.
how even the phrase past life is convenient. But even that's a misnomer. That's,
It's a
that's
parallel
very easy to
life.
say because it's simple, but they're all concurrently happening right now. And they're all
Yeah.
affecting us, right? There's all the ways that our soul can ricochet through the universe is all happening in this moment when we open up to that level of consciousness and
So
awareness.
that is very interesting, and I mean my experience have shared that with me also. There's
Yeah.
even actually one particular experience where it does feel like I kind of it wasn't necessarily physically, but consciously traveled to another time that was happening simultaneously. Because I did a session with my medicine, the iboga, and I've always seen these wormholes that open up in the reality when I do it, and I
Yeah.
could never control like the navigation because everything was so chaotic. But at some point in my journey, to make a long story short, the Iboga taught me how to use certain part of my brain to kind of orient myself in this field. And eventually I was able to navigate these swirling tunnels, and when I would finish one, I would end up in a realm that I mean, thousands of different realms that just go beyond our wildest imagination that I have witnessed in that.
Amazing.
But one time there was these two beings that put their arms together to form this wormhole, and I for some reason felt that I really needed to concentrate for that one because it had started at the same time as one of the songs from the Bwiti music that I was listening to, the people that are making like the traditional music that goes alongside an Iboga ceremony. And I just felt like I needed to focus on it. So I went and did it, and I really like whirled around left, right, up, down. It was just very crazy. It felt like a video game, honestly. And so, but I managed to do it, and it was much bigger than the ones from before, also this particular portal. And at the end, I landed in this other reality, but then there was only women there,
Hmm.
dancing and singing and clapping. And I was in Africa, I was in a temple, and I realized very, very soon enough that I was basically in that ceremony of the music I was listening to,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
that's what was going on. I could see all of them singing. I could see like everything how it was happening in real time, and they could see me too. And then I
Yes.
instantly remembered when I was in Africa and I was doing ceremonies in a temple, there were times when I would see these beings, these ancestors, these spirits coming to the temple and start singing and dancing and flying around with all of us. And I was like, holy shit, like in that moment, I'm basically the equivalent of what I have seen, but from the other perspective.
Yes.
So that
Right.
was like,
And and the medicine, with all her beauty shows you this so that we can have these conversations and so you can bring this forward and so we can
yep,
share these lessons of oneness and expansion and wormholes and the unity of all things, right?
exactly.
I mean, even when we're talking about the wormholes and the 10,000 infinite levels of experiences, we're still talking about non-duality, and that's the beautiful thing, right? The non-duality comes from the infinite. The infinite
Yeah.
allows the oneness to occur. You know?
Exactly. No, I mean,
Yeah.
this is so interesting. Like, and honestly, I'm very grateful for this whole conversation. I'm curious if you wish to share, like, what's your when you say you connect to the Akashic and to people's spirit guides, how does that happen for you? Like,
Yeah,
what takes place basically?
for sure. Um, so I first connected to spirit guides and even my own ancestors years ago when I was actually living in Africa. I was living in Cameroon for a couple of
Oh,
years.
oh
I
wow.
lived in the forest with the Baka hunter-gatherers out in the Congo Basin rainforest. Um, but I was completely cut off from the modern world and communication, for months and months at a time.
Hmm.
And I had no idea, but my grandfather had passed, and I didn't learn that for like 9 months later. But during this period, he was coming to me. And at the time, I just thought, oh, when I get back home, I need to go see my grandpa. I just thought, and he lived, many states away across the US. It's like, oh, when I get home, I need to go see him. I'm thinking about him a lot. I miss him, and this was going on. I was thinking about him every day for like a week. This was many years ago. And it wasn't until I got home and I learned, oh, your grandpa passed away. And I said, okay, when exactly was that? And I traced it back to this period of time when he was present for me. And it was in this, it wasn't, I even knew at the time, it's like I wasn't just thinking of him, but I didn't have a concept for what that was. But that, because I had been in the jungle so cut off and with no other way of communication and knowing that he had passed, my brain just shifted when I learned that he had passed away. My brain just shifted and opened up to this idea that, oh, I really was communicating with him, and I just believed it
Wow,
because there's
that's a
nothing else, no
wonderful.
other way explained it for me. It was so powerful, and there's no other, even scientific, rational way made any sense. So my brain just allowed that opening to occur, and then when that happens. um, many other of my ancestors and other beings started to speak to me. And for me, it's mostly clear cognizance of a form in various ways where they just sort of push the knowing to me, and then I
Okay.
have to put words to it.
Okay.
It's not, sometimes it's images and sometimes it is words, but often it's just like messages that then I translate. And usually it's pretty easy, but sometimes I'm like, okay, what's the word for this? What exactly is this that they're trying to say? So I was
Hmm.
doing this just sort of in the background for many, many years. And then it was actually not so many years ago, more recently, when I finally decided, oh, I'm going to have a series of sessions for Akashic readings with somebody. I'd never gotten an Akashic reading before. And I don't do anything halfway. So I
Right.
signed up for a series of 6 sessions with this master of Akashic records. And the first session, she does her thing and prepares. We're on Zoom, and she's like, "Okay, I'm going to go up into the records." And I was just like, "Okay, I'm just going to energetically." I didn't even know what it meant. I just energetically, I'm going to just travel with her and see where she goes. I'm like, I'm just
Huh.
going to hitch a ride, basically. Like I'm just going to hold on to
It's a
it
ride.
and travel up with her and see where this is. What is this place? I had no idea. And so we went there, and I realized it was an energetic realm that I played in all the time. It was a place that I
Wow.
was very comfortable with, but I had never used the information. I had just sort of played there and learned some things, but I had never like actively like tried to learn things there. I just sort of things were picked up whenever they were. So for
Hmm.
me, it's like now. So I just learned, and then I studied with her for a year. I studied with her for a year and learned her methods and just practiced with a group in being more intentional and directional and purposeful and using these realms of frequency for the good of the person I'm working with or myself.
Wow.
Now for me, it literally is just like I open up and I ground, and then I just tune my radio. It's like, and so the first realm I go into, they're the closest is the ancestors of the person I'm working for. They're right here, they're right here. They're very close. And if they want to speak, then they'll let me know. It's like they'll let me know, and and often if they're there for this person, very quickly they'll come in like immediately as soon as I open up and I'm ready to hear them. They're right there, and then so I'll listen to them and I'll share those messages, and then I'll tune up the radio a little bit energetically. I'll just sort of do and go into some higher, this next frequency band, if you will, and where there's spirit guides, angels, other beings that come to me and want us. And again, if they want to speak in service of this person that I'm working with, they'll push those messages to me. And then I'll tune up once that's complete. Then I'll tune up to the next layer, which is the Akashic field. For me, it's just
Okay.
past that, the Akashic field, where then that's where I need to pull down the information based on the conversation and the needs and the, whatever I'm working with the person in the session. So there I have to then like, okay, this is the question. Let me energetically attune to that realm and the question for this person's highest alignment and pull down the information that they're looking for to give them what they need to move forward with integrity. Um,
Hmm.
and now that I'm doing this, I do this so often that I'm never far from those frequencies.
Okay.
Sometimes, life happens and I might go off and whatever. I need to come back and ground them soon. But for the most part, when I'm in, I'm sitting here and I do this work, those frequencies are very close. So I do open and close the records. There's things you're supposed to do where you're supposed to sort of I was trained to, and most of the methods of accessing these realms where you're supposed to say a prayer of intention to open the records and also close them in a certain way when you're done to keep things clean, and
Hmm.
I do those things but in a very organic way, um, because they're just right here. They're just right
Okay.
here. And we're all, when we're all connected deeply from our heart space, it doesn't have to be mysterious. Of course, if all time is now, then all the vibrations and frequencies are all here for us to receive.
Hmm.
It's the most natural thing, and the ancestors and the spirits are all the realms are just here for us to communicate it. And they want it, like the spirit guides and they want to help us. They want to communicate. They're eager. They're eager to share. They're looking at us with admiration of like, wow, look at all this suffering. Let me support this person. They're here for us, you
Yeah,
know,
that
here
sucks.
for us. But they're not allowed to cross the veil unless we reach up to them. One of the
Right.
things I share often is like I was shown by my guides early on. there's this old game that's back in the day of like this barrel of monkeys, where there's these plastic monkeys with these little hooked hands, and the game is just to like make a little like how who can make the longest line of monkey toys. There's these little monkeys with these hooks on their hands, and you just like hook them together and make a line of monkeys. And I was shown like, oh, the way we can connect up and connect with our guides and our angels and all the beings beyond is just from the longing from our heart, from the
Mm.
longing from our heart, reach up as if we're hooking our hand and we're ready to be connected to by the angel, by the spirit guide, by our guides of all forms. When we have that receptivity to be connected to, then they're allowed to reach down and support us. But until we reach out first with our intention from our heart, from our deepest longing, they're not allowed to interfere without us first asking them in that way.
Wow, this is really, I mean, it's first of all, I want to say just thank you for sharing this, um for being you really, and for allowing yourself to do this and being of support to people in this way. I mean, I really resonate with everything that you've shared. I think that it's really, I mean, let's see. Do you are you okay if we continue and like going even deeper in this? Or okay?
Please, let's go. I have
All
time.
right.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
I love it. I love this. This is what I love. These conversations. This is
Amazing,
we're both
amazing.
we're both like smiling and lit up. Our energy is expansive and here right now. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
here
So,
for it.
okay, let me ask you, like, in the context of like non-duality, like where do you place kind of the spirit guides from people, and like how does that correlate like these ideas of like apparent separateness between, let's say, a guide and you, and then the oneness of everything? And so like what do you see regarding that?
Beautiful question. Yeah. You know, like the way I'm shown the universe and this universal intelligence, this universal consciousness of which we are a part, is that again, this universal consciousness is here to play and to see and to celebrate itself. And the only way it can do that is to separate out into the infinite forms,
Hmm. Wow,
right?
such a
And the
beautiful
infinite
answer.
forms, and so but there's periods, and even if we want to take the scientific view, right, of like the Western scientific creation is the Big Bang. And for years I had this intuition that, oh yeah, the Big Bang is this infinite. There's something behind the Big Bang. Like when I was growing up, the whole story was like, okay, the original creation was there was nothing, and then there was a point, and then it was so dense, and then it exploded into everything. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. There was actually there was a contraction of everything back into the single point that then could explode again into the everything again, right? So there's these
Hmm.
periods of expansion and contraction across the universe.
The breath of life.
Yeah, and that's the yin and yang of Taoism, and that's, in many other traditions, there's all these alternating forms of light and dark and everything and nothing in many forms across all traditions. And so when we talk about the non-duality, we're talking about the nothing or everything. When we talk about us as non-duality, we're talking about we're so everything that we're one.
Yeah,
But within that, then there's this myriad of ways. There's this infinite number of ways of expression and everything. I mean, my experience is that everything is alive. Everything has a and aliveness, right? From one way is just frequency, right? So
right,
just one way that I can put framework to this is everything is frequency, and frequency carries information and intention and communication. And so, right now I'm looking out my window at the pine trees where I live, and we have deep conversations and the rocks and also deep within the earth and the water and everything. And so all these forms of spirit, all these levels of consciousness are just the same as the tree spirits and the same as us on different realms of being, of which there's an infinite number of them. And they're all, we're all here now in this doing our dance in all these different ways. Just
Mhm.
as you're thousands of miles away from me in a different country, whatever that means, it doesn't mean anything. These other realms are just in a different frequency band of being that's also right here. Even if they're, some of these beings, right, are clearly associated with other, planets or other stars or other realms,
Mhm.
but all of those are also just right here. They're far away for us. And it's weird, right? Like you and I can have this conversation and we all scientifically accept that, you're in Mexico and I'm in California in the US, and we're simultaneously having this conversation through Zoom, through these ether, I'm not connected to any wires, through the ethers of broadband, whatever. And we think
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
normal, but it's exactly the same through our own technology of connection to these other realms of frequency. It's no different. It's not, it's just simple as that. It's literally that simple. We just tune our frequency, and we were taught most of us in the Western cultures were taught that this was impossible and not true. So most people are closed to the idea that but when we open
Hmm.
ourselves up and just allow our frequencies to expand to hold that, then all of a sudden it's just they're right here. As simple as I tune into the right, click on the right channel and link and find you on Zoom, as simple as that, I can tune in to my frequency and connect with Jesus and connect to spirit guides for somebody or ancestors or whomever else.
Hmm. Very beautiful analogies here. This is really interesting. So let me take this into another subject that I'm very curious about these days because of some recent things that happened.
Okay.
um, in your experience of getting these messages from people and guides and things like that, have you ever had to, have you ever kind of encountered resistance from quote unquote negative entities that you had to protect yourself from or these kind of things? Like what do you do for it to prevent that from happening? And how did it happen if it did? And like anything you can want to share about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, again, the view that I hold, and this, this came from my Taoist tradition where they hold that, again, the world and all the realms are infinitely neutral,
Yep.
that everything is possible. And so one of my teachers, my Taoist teacher, would share, like, energetically, he would talk about karmic tigers. And he was like, if you're not careful if you have certain energy and you're building your energy and you're doing this work, it's nothing for a mama tiger to need to feed her cubs and just come through and eat you for lunch to feed to her cubs because she needs to, and that's just the way the universe works, right? So I was taught
Hmm.
this many years ago and kept these views in my mind, but I've seen in myself and in many people I work with that they do have, you know, darker energies, shadow energies, demons of various kinds. All these words are
Yeah, yeah.
flavors of the same thing. Um, that that can sort of lodge onto them or into them or attach to them in certain ways. And I see that as very, very real. And there's a couple ways to approach them. My favorite, I'll say this, is just when we fill ourselves with so much love and light and openness, right? So it's the opposite of protection. If we're just so completely open and so full of love and trust and light, then there's nowhere for something dark or heavy to attach,
Hmm.
right? It's when we're more closed and there's walls, and a wall might create a dark corner energetically, where then an energy
Yeah.
can come on and latch onto, right? So even when I'm working with another person, the first thing that I'll try is just the first thing is just to support the other person I'm working with into dropping into their heart space and expanding their consciousness to their all of their being, and maybe do a scan of their whole body and then their energy field, and just bring their heart consciousness and awareness out into all of their being. And if it's and sometimes that's enough just to dislodge and allow that darker entity to just to wander off because there's now light there.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's more deeply embedded into part of themselves, and we need to do some more work. I like to do the soft path, though, even if it's more deeply embedded, a darker demon energy or things like this, where I love to do somatic work with people in the energy realm and just allow that person to bring the love and light to that part of themselves as much as possible, just gently dislodge the darker entity. If we just, I can just
Brute
pulse of
force.
energy and push it away. But what happens then is it'll just come back if we don't, again,
Hmm.
using this analogy of light and love to be the place where the darkness can't quite come into because then it turns into light, to spread light there. So those are experiences working with other people, but I also, see these energies all around in the world. I recently had an experience in an ayahuasca ceremony
Okay.
where I was working for the first time. I went into ceremony. I was curious about this other tradition, and there was some shaman coming from Brazil that I didn't know, and they came up, and I sat in ceremony with them. And the first night was very mild and nothing really to say, although there were a couple of demons that popped in to my consciousness, and I was just like, "What are you doing here?" I can see, because I see and work with energy all day long. I was like, "Oh, what's this energy? You're not." I was like, "You're not welcome here," and they sort of smiled at me and then popped away. And I was like, "Hmm." But I didn't think actually anything of it. The next night, the shaman went much deeper, and this was deep in an ayahuasca ceremony. The shaman went much deeper and opened up a really deep portal. And what I saw was that all of these demons, dark energies, flooded into the room and actually took over and possessed a lot of the people in the
Wow.
ceremony. And I immediately, at that point, it was deep enough where my love diffuse bubble wasn't quite enough, and I just put a shield. I just,
Okay.
put a boundary. So just energetically, okay, this is me. I have a firm boundary. I'm doing one right now. Here's a boundary, and you're not welcome. I can talk to you through it, but I'm here. No thanks. I saw people who had never danced the night before get up, and I saw their eyes change, and I saw them dance in ways that were unlike if they had never danced before, or if they were dancing previously, they danced totally differently
Hmm.
during this time, and they were taking over. And so I talked to this demon. I said, "What are you doing here?" And they looked at me, and this is like a telepathic communication to these spirits. And there's one large one that came up to me and kind of wanted my attention. And he's like, "Oh, you're blocking this." And I was like, "Yeah, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "We're very welcome here, you know." And the shaman was not at all
Wow.
protecting from those entities, not at all. Created a really wide rift and was no protection. And we had this long conversation, and then they're like, "Okay, you don't want this power?" And I said, "No."
They'll try to convince you, right? That's all the
They
ways
tried to
what they
convince
do.
me.
Like
They offered me the power, they offered me the gold, they offered me the
all the
riches,
sweet stuff.
all the sweet stuff. And I was like, no, no, no. And then I actually like left the ceremony and went outside and left. And then
Oh
as
wow.
soon as I went back in later, as soon as the main people on the altar who were leading the ceremony changed and they offered some other people in the group to play music, the energy in the room shifted, the demon energy went away. People who had
Hmm.
been dancing immediately sat down or changed their pattern of dancing, and the whole thing shifted. And what they showed me was that there was this big network of, obviously, we talked about it earlier, plant medicines and these ceremonies are really having this massive resurgence and
Yep.
renaissance around the world, and that's beautiful. And
Yeah.
simultaneously, these darker entities are there's these networks of energy where these dark entities can infiltrate these ceremonies and prey upon communities that aren't shielded and protected by the proper hosting and holding of the space appropriate to their tradition. When
Hmm.
people are using these without deep reverence for all the realms of energy, we're easy prey because again, we open all the doors of consciousness and we're wide open for this type of energy. Yeah, so I'm curious. You said you had some experiences. I'm curious about
Oh
your experience.
yeah. I mean it's very it's almost like textbook similar to what you described, and I think that was my second ayahuasca ceremony, that particular one that was very eerily similar to what you described. I
Mm,
didn't necessarily see the portals, but I remember, I mean, we were like maybe 20 people. It was in Ecuador, and as soon as I tasted the ayahuasca, I was like, whoa.
mm,
I knew I was in for a ride with that one. Like, it was gonna be very, very strong. And maybe 15, 20 minutes in, everybody was feeling it. Like people were already crying, throwing up, but me, I had nothing. And to the point where I even asked for a second cup, and the shaman looked at me and was like, are you serious? Like, and then I was the only one who got two cups in that night. And then I was still feeling nothing for maybe an hour and a half. And at some point, I started to feel like I needed to purge. And I started purging. And as soon as I did, like, everything, like the whole DMT realm opened up. And at that point, the frequency and everything just started wild, wild, wild. And then like all these beings were there. Basically, they were already there. I didn't like see them coming, and I was just amongst them. And just like you, I kind of my initial, and at that point, I didn't know anything, right? I was just kind of very much a spiritual seeker. I didn't know nothing, and so, but for some reason, I didn't trust these beings. And
Uh,
so I didn't know why, but I just couldn't. And they were basically, like you mentioned, trying to convince me. They were showing me all sorts of wonderful things that they could do, and they were kind of asking me to join them in that. And I was like, no, and I didn't know why, but the boundary that we were talking about, it was already there. There was this difference between my level of perception and where they were, and they were asking me to kind of cross over that. And for some reason, I felt like that was not a good idea at all, at 0%. Like I felt like what they represented was the opposite of what I represent. And
mm,
so I was like, no, I'm sorry. And the more that I would say no, eventually they kind of started to show their true colors. Like they got mad at me basically for declining the offer. And when they did, the whole facial expression and everything, they were completely different than what they were showing earlier. And but then I mean it got very crazy in that day because at some point, first of all, I tried to convince some of them. There was one of these beings that I kind of felt that he was not like as into it as the others. Like, like I was like, maybe I can actually convince him to leave this place.
oh, that's
And I
funny.
did, and I managed to do it. And
No.
he did actually kind of open his heart or whatever. I mean, and it just kind of flew away, and it was one of the most beautiful sight I've seen. Um, and but then like other ones were trying to convince me, and one of them got like crazy mad at me when because he was really going hard at it, like showing me all these. And I realized they basically represented what could be considered like the seven deadly sin. Like that's what they were
Oh,
selling.
huh.
So I didn't want anything to do with it. And so one of them declined and got out of the ceremony circle, and I kind of like with my third eye or whatever, like I was able to follow it. And went outside the ceremony, and there the shamans and the helpers, they dug a hole to put people's purging in it.
Mhm.
And that entity or that being or whatever, like it came next to that hole, materialized the cup and started drinking off of it. And it fueled it, like it just, I saw all of its energy like rejuvenate and like expand. And I saw that and I was like, holy shit. Like,
Uh,
he's literally drinking people's stuff, like people's negative energy and getting boosted from it. So I was like, wow, I'm grateful I didn't trust these beings.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean the negative energy, right? Going back to years ago of my training in Tantra, right? So one of the ways to talk about Tantra is classical tantra is that, every part of the world is sacred, including all of those parts that are heavy or shunned by other traditions. So that's why the
Mhm.
focus on sexuality, if most of the Buddhism and Hinduism at the time was like, okay, let's be monastic and be celibate. Okay, well then we're going to use those energies in the tantra for connection with spirit, but also all the medicines, all the drugs, all the, all death, all the things. But then what I learned in that tradition was actually all the tools to transform alchemically those heavier, darker energies into fuel. So I
Right.
was shown, and I know those techniques now of creating an internal alchemical crucible of transformation and I know how much energy is available in all the darkness and all of our purge energetically and even physically,
Yep.
right? It's massively potent. So these beings, of course, right? And again, going back to the idea that the universe is deeply neutral.
Yep.
So,
At that time, I didn't know that. At that time,
this
I didn't know
energy, right, in these
that.
ceremonies, this energy that we're offering is widely available. There's a lot of energy, and we're offering it up, right? So it's important even when we're offering our purge and when we're offering, our energy, like, is it being offered in a way where it's being received by the earth with the goodness, or is it
Mhm.
just dumped and available for other beings to come and feed on that maybe are not so friendly to the harmony that we're looking for? But yeah, I was shown again that there's this big network and that these beings are as with the renaissance of plant medicine, that these types of demon energies, whatever we want, whatever word we want to use for them from whatever
Mhm.
tradition, are very present and available. So, I do encourage people. I work with plant medicines, and I think they're these beautiful gateways and
Yep.
beautiful tools and beautiful allies. And also, I do encourage caution for people to
Yeah.
know because it, shamanism, it's real. These spirits are real. This is not
Exactly.
make
It's,
believe. This stuff
we're,
is
we're
real.
not exactly. We're
This
not
is
just
this
joking
is
around
like this is the
here.
real thing. And just be conscious and aware and make sure we have good guides that we trust and are on a path that is deeply aligned with our heart space, and we're doing it with full intention.
Oh
Yeah, I
man,
mean the magicalness of our world is beyond comprehension, but it's becoming it's becoming more and more
apparent.
apparent in every breath, with every year, with every passing month, and it's a
I
wonderful time to
agree.
be alive. A wonderful time to be alive.
Yeah, it totally is. I mean, for me, if we kind of tie that back in at the end, I can share like the moment that for me kind of sealed the deal, so to speak, in the understanding of non-duality and oneness, because in one of the experience, I was actually communicated by. I still don't know precisely what that was. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit. Maybe it was myself from the future. These are kind of the main two potentials in my being right now. But in one of the ceremony, I was explained that there is a spiritual awakening going on the planet and that we're essentially remembering how to be God. And and that some people like me were having these kinds of experiences and we were kind of starting the process to be some kind of way showers for others. And but at the same time, it's like everything is happening perfectly. And in that moment, everything had converged, synchronicities beyond my wildest imagination. And but it also said that I would forget about this experience. I would just receive a key that would serve me kind of subconsciously for the years ahead. But then that the experience would continue at a moment when I least expect it. And that
Mm.
is precisely what happened. I forgot everything about what happened that day until years later when I did another massive initiation for myself where I fasted for many, many days. Then I did a double ceremony with Iboga in a dark room by myself and with like just complete uh I mean I was very, very afraid at that moment of what I was doing because I knew the what I was getting into. And yeah, and at some point in that ceremony I almost died. And in that like when something happened when I felt myself dying, but then I realized that this was happening, something kind of came up and I got a jolt of energy that literally made me jump on my knees.
Mm.
Uh, and then I was on my knees with my heart rate at like 180 beat per second, out of breath, and just wondering what the heck just happened. And because I was from laying down, like that's almost impossible movement. And so I just was on my knees sobbing and I said out loud, like, all I want is the truth. And in that moment was the deepest form of surrender that I had ever experienced because I was like at my wit's end, so to speak. I
Mm.
the seeking, it was just like the culmination of it. It was just like that's all I'm looking for, the truth. Like, please, God, something that. And so, and it's literally in that moment that I got it. It just happened. Those same synchronicities happened. The same kind of convergence as the last time is what I now call a revelation moment or rapture moment. And and then I just heard those voice activation inside of me again, and it just said, "Remember me." And as soon as I heard that, I was transported years prior in that initial moment, remembered all the thing about the spiritual awakening, remembering how to be God. And as I was remembering that, my mind was just blown impossibly. And I saw my whole life happen and all the decisions that were kind of related to my path and who I really am and alignment with my the light that is within me, the unique perspective of the divine. And and then it led to all of these things and led to that preparation for the ceremony, all the things that I had done, doing it, going beyond my fear, the courage, almost dying, all the things that happened,
Mm.
and just falling to my knees saying out loud, all I want is the truth. And then the voice just said, so you want to know the truth? Well, here it is. And in that moment, my heart just exploded. It
Mhm.
exploded in a wave of unconditional love that expanded and dissolved my whole body, the bed, the walls, the streets, the cities, the universe, physical reality, concepts, fears, doubts, notions, everything just dissolved. And suddenly there was just this ecstatic, infinitely expanding energy that was eternal, forever. And there was nothing else than that. It was everything. There's not even words that can conceptualize it because it was beyond words, beyond concepts, beyond everything, beyond, beyond.
Beyond,
So,
beyond.
and then the first thing that I had a thought at some point, I say at some point just to have like words to make reference, but it's not really how it happened.
Of
But
course, it's just here.
the thought was love is the truth. And when I thought that, I was transported back into my body. And then I was just feeling this pure energy flowing through everywhere in waves and then the first feeling of my like human self was just utmost gratitude. Uh and it yeah, it was just that's all I could feel actually. It was just thank you
Thank
to
you.
I didn't even know to what I was saying thank you, but I knew that I had just received what I was looking for this whole time.
And love is the truth, right? I mean, it's the same. Like I'm shown that love, love is the closest thing we have on this realm to God, to universal connection. Love
Hmm.
is that fabric that we talk about when we talk about all of these things that are spiritual and beyond.
Yep,
Love is the tangible way that it enters us and intersects with us. Love is the fabric. Love is the word we give to this. Yeah. Love is what we give.
exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful story. I love that. And
Yeah,
so, I just want to affirm for you that then, that's the same in the way of me saying I went back in time to myself several times. I mean, you just told a story where you did the same. You
exactly.
and or God, right? You and or God in whatever forms or the universe, there's no difference there from that level of consciousness, of course.
Exactly.
It's not about this Western, I'm God kind of way. No, it's about
Yeah,
we're
man
all
in the
one.
sky.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful story. Thank you. It's great to hear that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would love for the people listening here to know where they can find you, where they can reach out, what kind of sessions you offer, and like, just share everything you want to share.
Thank you. Yeah, so my Instagram is at Natural Heart Alchemy,
Okay,
at Natural Heart Alchemy, and my website is the same, Natural Heart Alchemy. And so both of those places are where you can find sessions with me and the programs I'm offering, and just connect with me, reach out, say hi. I love having these conversations. I have a couple of kinds of sessions that I say I offer, and I do, Akashic readings, and I do mediumship sessions, and I do spiritual mentoring, you
okay.
know, and the truth is, as we're talking about, the truth is when I sit down with somebody, what transpires is what needs to happen in that moment, you know? And so there's
I
not
know what you mean.
really, so we have a session that has a purpose, and that's great,
Yeah,
and the intention of the person that wants to connect with me from a certain modality, and I respect that. And also, I just want to really put out there in this state of really expansiveness that when we sit down with people, you know, it's not so important to figure out like how to work with me. If you feel at all called, then we can just connect. You can also like book a 30-minute free just hello, get to know me call and just have a conversation and see what's going on, and we can find ways to connect. And I look forward to just connecting and growing the network of all like-minded people who are in harmony with this conversation of awareness and unity and connection. I mean, it's such a beautiful conversation and flow of oneness in this
Totally.
through these words, right? Through these words we can use
Yeah.
it. So, yeah,
We're
thanks so
doing
much.
our best. We're doing our best.
Exactly. Right. And that's what we're here for, doing our best just to bring the light forward and to be a beacon of what's possible and what already is in this changing time. Beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being you. Much love to you. And yeah, let's see what happens with life. Let's keep the unfolding going and enjoy the
Love that.
process.
Thanks so much for all that you do, and it's been a joy to talk to you. And I look forward to seeing how our connection unfolds from here as well. Yeah. Thank you so much. Take care.
Perfect.